Hey City Church, welcome to another edition of Bite-Sized, just a summary of what we talked about on the Sunday morning. And on Sunday we continued our series in the book of Acts, to the ends of the earth, and we looked at the early church. We've been looking at different themes so far, and we're trying to discover, the mission that God is on. And it started really at the day of Pentecost when God poured out His Holy Spirit upon the people. And so the early church was born as a result of that. And we just really wanted to find out what are some of the key characteristics of the early church, that sustained and enabled the church to, really overcome some hardships and persecution and to survive really to this day. And so we looked at a few characteristics. And the first one we looked at was that the church grew warmer through fellowship. They devoted themselves to fellowship. It was something that they invested themselves in. We live in a very isolated world today where people are talking about their own personal space and where we don't really want people to be too close to us. But the early church, they were really committed to one another. They spent time together. They shared meals, with glad and sincere hearts. They just enjoyed being together. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we still have the church today, where people from different backgrounds, different interests, different personalities can come together, because they have this common ground in the faith that they share. And it's amazing, if you go to a different country even that is totally different from yours, you go to a church and straight away there's a connection point. And so I think it's something we should really treasure and cherish, and really invest ourselves into the fellowship. Secondly, the church grew deeper through discipleship. It says in Acts chapter 2 in verse 44 that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. And so what really stood out for me was that they devoted themselves. The new believers devoted themselves. Nobody made them do it. They had this internal desire to grow and to learn more. And so they spent time listening to the teaching, doing discipleship. And so it's a real challenge for us, I think, today to keep devoting ourselves to grow as disciples of Jesus. And so it's not really, I gave the illustration of church sometimes, it's been treated as like a restaurant where you come in and you sit down and people serve you and you say, I have a bit of that, but I don't do that, and you kind of pick and choose. But really it's a bit more like a buffet where you actually come in and you have to get your own plate and you have to refill your own drink. So it's much more like a self-service. You have to do it yourself. It's not really up to us. We encourage, we try to create an atmosphere of discipleship, but really the devotion came from themselves. And I think that's a great challenge for us and a great encouragement that we can commit ourselves to grow and to keep growing as we try to follow Jesus. And then thirdly, the church grew stronger through worship. Worship was a key element. They devoted themselves to the breaking of bread and prayers and praising God. That's what it says in that passage in Acts 2. And so there was real commitment to worship. And worship is powerful. It's one of our main characteristics on a Sunday morning. We play a big emphasis on worship, on corporate worship, because we really feel that this is a powerful tool of engaging people with the presence of God. Worship can change your perspective. You come in and you had a busy week and lots of things happening, and maybe even right now you're in your office or in different other places, and when you come to, when you start singing worship, when you engage with God in worship, it kind of changes your perspective. And the things that you thought were so big and so huge in your life, all of a sudden become quite small, because you focus on something else. You focus on someone that is bigger than you, and that changes your perspective. So we really, put a big emphasis on worship, because we really believe that when the people come together worshiping God, not just singing God, worshiping, it comes from the heart. It's an attitude of surrender where you lay yourself before the Lord, where you come before Him, with an attitude of surrender. Really, that's true worship, I think. And so it's a powerful thing, and it held the church together 2,000 years ago, and it still does today. So. So thirdly, then the church grew stronger through worship, and then fourthly, the church grew broader through ministry. It said that they devoted themselves and that they gave to people who had a need, and that they shared their possessions. And so I talked about the fact that we each have a spiritual gift. If you're a Christian today, then the Holy Spirit lives within you, and He lives within you, not just by Himself, but he brings gifts along, spiritual gifts, the Bible tells us. And there are different passages that we looked at that talk about spiritual gifts. And I think it's really important to find out, what is your main spiritual gift? Because I really believe that one day we will be accountable for the gift that God has given you. And God will ask you, what have you done with the gift that I've given you? And if all you've ever done is further your career, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but it's about building God's kingdom. In your workplaces, of course, but also at home and also in your local church. So we have to use that spiritual gift to advance God's kingdom. And you all have one, each and every single one of you. And if you don't know it, then I encourage you to find it out, to study the Bible, to test some of them, and see whether you find out what your main gifting is. And then lastly, the church grew larger through evangelism, as a result of people using their gifts, being devoted to fellowship and worship, by sharing what they have, by using the gift that they've been given. The church grew, and the Lord added daily to the church those who are being saved. So we are part of a gospel, of a global gospel. Jesus is building his church, not just in Derby, but in the UK, around the world. And it's great to see what God is doing. And so let's be the church. Let's have these characteristics at the very center of who we are as individuals, because we are the church. We make the church. It's not a building that we attend, it's the people who are the church. So I encourage you maybe this week to just think about some of those characteristics of the early church, and just ask yourself, about these characteristics, whether, you can contribute towards them, whether they are part of your life, and make them a priority, so that together we can advance and build God's kingdom. God bless you this week.